I'll be spending the next 24 hours alone in Albion Online.
Oh god.
With no guides or friends allowed, how far will I be able to progress? Will I get some shiny gear and a fancy mount? Or will I still be rocking this loincloth and my trusty mule? A big thanks to Albion Online for sponsoring this video. You can play the game yourself for free on PC, iOS, or Android, including their new European server. In a land far away, I woke up on a beach after my ship was attacked and I was thrown overboard into the sea. I found this wounded crafter waiting at the top of the hill who had also survived the attack. He sent me up this lighthouse to get a better look when I spotted these enemies on the bridge below. I'm guessing that's where I'll need to go. He sent me off after some stone and logs next to make a weapon, then to a blacksmith to craft my first sword. I equipped it, and after quite a lot of indecision, chose Heroic Cleave for the spell.
Let's do that one.
The crafter seemed pretty happy about it and gave me a shield to go with it. You guys have had it now, once I figure out how to get to that bridge. I found it through this door and dealt with a set of 3 enemies first,
Oh yeah.
using the slashing Heroic Cleave spell to hit them all at once.
Stab you. Do I block? Can I block? I don't really know how to block.
I dealt with one more booger on the bridge and then opened up my Destiny board for the first time. Unlocking different things here allows your character to use higher tiers of gear. There are 8 tiers altogether, and I want to see how far I can get before the end of this challenge. Without any guides at all, of course. I was distracted after that and left this bag. Oops. Then went through this gate next to find the rest of the crew. Looks like there was quite a few. I spoke with Captain Tia, who suggested I buy a mount.
Oh, I get a mount?
So I headed to the marketplace. This mule seems very affordable. Perfect. After speaking with the crafter again, I gathered some basic materials and took them to the toolmaker for my first pick and axe.
Hello, Fernando.
The crafter Silas gave me a sickle and skinning knife too and sent me off to gather materials to repair the ship.
To the forest.
In the forest, I fought some tough little foxes to gather their hide and chop down some birch trees. Then in the mountains, I collected cotton and copper. I took it all back and refined everything at the proper stations before dropping it off at the crane. While they worked to repair the ship so we could return to Albion, Captain Tia sent me to steal a map from an enemy outpost in the forest. I headed off on my mule using the mini-map to find my way. These enemies are called heretics, and I took the first couple out easily with my swipey move. There was a new one with fire attacks, and I never even thought to move out of the orange circle that appeared before his attack. Oh, I guess I should have probably paid more attention to that. I managed to take him and his buddy out anyway, along with a few more before finding the map. After that, I had earned enough fame, which is sort of like experience, to use a learning point to unlock the next tier of gear on my Destiny board. Then, on the way out of the camp, I fought a little more for a bit of extra fame before making my way back. I turned in the map, and now that I can use tier 2 gear, I have to choose between a hunter's bow, mage's staff, or warrior's sword for my weapon next. I wasn't sure, but decided I already had a sword for a bit, so maybe I'll give the bow a try. I also needed new tier 2 armor, I just couldn't find where to make it.
Oh. Okay. There's a little thing right here that you click. I see it now.
Eventually, I found it in this little helmet tab. Which one to make, though? Each one has its own benefits, and I decided just to make one of each for now. I put on my new gear and chose a healing spell for the mercenary jacket. Then the ship was ready and Captain Tia sent me off to cause some trouble at the heretic fort in the mountains. Works for me. I hopped on mule and made my way to the mountains, dismounting when I got close because I wasn't sure if they could kill my mule. Once inside, I started taking out the heretics with my new bow, but I was having trouble figuring out how to use one of the spells. I managed to take out this first group anyway, then this second set gave me a bit more trouble. Still clearly oblivious about avoiding the orange danger zones, and unable to figure out the new attack, it wasn't going very well. This guy Jose jumped in on the next fight though, making things a little easier. And I finally figured out how to use the spell I'd been trying to. I'm supposed to do this on my own, but I guess I can't help if someone random jumps in. I continued on and set the enemy ammunition on fire.
Oh, I set some stuff on fire.
Then I'm not sure what happened to Jose, but I finished the rest of the quest with Code Flag here, taking on these cannoneers. I lit the signal fire next, calling the ship, and then we were off to Albion. I chose the Highland Cross region to start in, and next thing I knew, I was there. I was in my second hour now with a set of Tier 2 gear and this magnificent mule ready to take on Albion. I spoke with the Royal Commander and was rewarded with 3 free days of premium, which is all I'll be allowed to use for this challenge. Then he sent me for a tour of the town and things were sure a lot more interesting here. There were some different mounts and this NPC making some sort of portal. After the tour, there were more quests I could do, but I wasn't sure how I was feeling about this bow and wanted to make myself another sword. So I headed off to some place called Mace Knoll to get more birchwood and copper. There were random enemies scattered around too, and I fought several, leveling up as I went. After collecting what I needed, I went back to refine the wood into planks and ore into bars. Then made myself a new Tier 2 sword and shield.
Good choice.
I kept my bow equipped for now, wanting to give it a fair chance. Then I decided to do another quest for the Royal Commander and headed to this expedition portal. It transported me to what looked like some sort of mine, and Portal Guy told me some stuff about the heretics. My first encounter here, though, was rats. They were easy enough to deal with, despite my horrible usage of spells. I managed to deal with these 2 poachers too, but I was struggling a bit, to say the least. I used a healing spell next and continued on, fighting a couple more of the goons and some rats too before I finally dodged my first orange special move. And would you look at that, I did it again.
Move.
It must have been a fluke though, because then I didn't, for like the whole rest of the expedition. I think I was trying to keep an eye on which spell was ready to use and just couldn't keep up with it all, except for this guy's fire spinner. That got me moving.
Oh god.
I made it to the end anyway though, where an extra tough deranged overseer was waiting with his whip. I cleared out these little scavengers first, then set my sights on the big guy.
Oh, ow.
He got me with his whip once, but I dodged the next one.
Oh.
He had another big move up his sleeve and started spinning with the whip, so I backed up and finished him off with my bow.
Woo.
I got 1,000 silver for my trouble, and after traveling back through the portal, turned in the quest with the commander. I received a Tome of Insight and then skimmed over what it said about it. I'll use that sometime later, I guess. Then I headed back to the Mace Knoll. I wanted to see where one of these glowing green caves go. Solo dungeon. Sounds like a perfect dungeon for me. I'd switched over to the sword this time and sure liked the feel of fighting this first guy.
That was fun.
These enemies were Tier 3 though, and it sure showed when I got myself in a bit over my head. I ran in and attracted more baddies than I'd bargained for. Then, of course, didn't dodge these moves at all, almost getting myself unalived. I ran away and healed, deciding that was enough for now. I'll be back another time. Instead, I headed back to town and found I had a cape. Oh, where'd you come from?
Ooh.
Then made myself a couple Tier 2 tools, but I needed more wood to finish the set. Lucky me, that's exactly one of the quests I can choose from this guy. It was back to Mace Knoll again to collect the trees I needed, including this new chestnut tree I could chop with the better axe. Then I switched back again to the bow to fight some of the heretics wandering around, taking their silver. When I started to get too heavy, I rode my poor mule back. The crafter wanted me to refine it all, so I did that too, then took it to finish the rest of my tools. I spoke with this shady-looking guy for a quest next, and he had me check that the coast was clear before giving me a gold coin. Then I repaired and sold my old Tier 1 stuff at the marketplace. My next goal was to make myself some Tier 3 gear. I'd unlocked the ability to use it, but couldn't craft it yet. So I crafted and studied some Tier 2 stuff instead at the Warrior's Forge to unlock it on my Destiny board. I needed bronze to craft any of it though, so I headed back to the Knoll. To make bronze, you need copper bars, which I already had, and tin ore, which I didn't already have. I found some limestone and sandstone first, then fought this arsonist and a walking rock. Eventually, I ran into the green ore that was tin. Apparently, I'm not the only one needing it. I continued traveling around, fighting random heretics and looking for more tin. Ouch. Clearly still oblivious to the orange warning for special attacks. It wasn't causing too much of an issue with these easier enemies, but it was almost the end of me with this tougher, artful arsonist. I promise it's just as painful to watch for me as it is for you. I'll figure it out eventually. I used some learning points for some random things next and started to get the hang of dodging finally. Well, sort of. Then I chopped down some chestnut trees too before heading back to town to refine everything. At the Warrior Forge, I found that I didn't have the thick leather I needed for another sword.
Let's play with you.
Good choice.
and ended up going with this battle axe. Sounds like fun to me. I used almost all of my brass ingots though and didn't have enough to make any new armor. Guess I'll go gather some more stuff. I chose this deadly chop move for my axe and spent the rest of the 3rd hour gathering stuff and testing out my new weapon. One of its spells throws the axe, so eventually I decided it was a good idea to use it first at range. It was especially useful when I spotted this orange glowy guy and wanted to take out his buddy first. I thought I was too close and he'd notice, but managed to get away with it. He dropped some tier 3 soldier boots, and I don't know why, but I waited to equip them, instead attacking the glowy guy first. I was careful to dodge the special attacks this time, accidentally axing this marmot while I was at it. Sorry. I didn't dodge everything, but I did manage to defeat him for quite a lot of fame and a nice chunk of change. After that, I finally equipped the new boots with a rejuvenating sprint spell, then continued gathering stuff till I couldn't carry anymore. I started working on my new tier 3 armor at the beginning of hour 4. I'd been using a hunter's jacket and even took the time to unlock tier 3 crafting for it. But when I saw I needed leather I didn't have yet, I changed my mind and just finished out with a full set of journeyman soldier gear. I chose a healing spell and a toughness buff, then set out to try another solo dungeon. The royal commander had given me a map for one, and it took me a minute to figure out how to use it. I was apparently completely blind to this use button, and finally realized that's how you opened this sealed royal sigil too. I used the map and found the dungeon in this new place called Brent Knoll. Inside was another mine like before, and another player ended up following me in. With my new tier 3 gear and El Manta tagging along, this dungeon was much easier. Our health did get pretty low fighting this bunch, and I'll be honest, I didn't even notice this chest until he opened it. Guess it's only fair he gets whatever was inside, but I'll pay better attention next time. We fought through a few more groups, and then these 2 very large fellows guarding this ramp, eventually making it to the boss. With around 4k health, the boss probably would have been pretty difficult to defeat on my own. Instead though, my mystery friend took most of his attacks. I still tried to get the chest at the end though. I'm not sure if he got stuff too, but I got a tier 3 cape and a bag of silver for myself. I returned to the royal commander and took a quest to go to the city next. The nearest one seemed pretty far on my map, so I went to this saddler to try to get a better mount. I had no idea how to get anything there though. Looks like you just need a horse to get a horse. And I just have a mule. I tried the marketplace too, after all, that's where I'd gotten my mule. Sure enough, I could buy a better mount there, but it would take almost all my money and I wasn't sure about that just yet. Guess it's still me and you then, mule. Oh, and this random player and their mule too. At the city, I spoke with the royal explorer Brienne, who told me all about the guilds. For this challenge though, I'm all on my own. It was a tour of the city next, which was a whole lot busier. There were some new places here, including an island merchant, full loot PvP, and an arena for non-lethal PvP, then a marketplace, repair station, and bank, just like the town. This place was a bit overwhelming though, and I didn't really need anything there yet, so I headed back to the open world for now. Ended up in a slightly higher level area called Hator with tier 4 enemies, fought several of them one-on-one for fame and money, then spent some learning points on shield and axe levels. There was also some sort of portal here, and I have no idea where it goes, but I'm going to assume I'm probably not quite ready for it yet. I headed back to Brent Knoll and spent the first half of hour 5 in a solo dungeon, this time actually solo. It was a mine again, and the first enemy was easy enough. The group I fought next, though, didn't go so well. I managed to dodge one attack and take out one enemy, then threw my axe straight at a wall, stood right in the middle of 2 special attacks, and ran away. I healed myself and went back in to try again, this time being more careful to avoid the big attacks. After finishing them, I slashed my way through a bunch of foul rats and another fire starter. The next area had another group to fight, and I did much better with this one, avoiding most of the special attacks and aiming my axe in a much more useful direction. After a few more successful battles, I ran right at this guy until I noticed his health. Hang on just a minute. I healed up and went back to try and attack him without these 2 joining in, but things didn't go exactly as planned. I decided to use that Tome of Insight I'd gotten and leveled up a few things, then went back in to try again. I don't think it made much difference and I ran away one more time. When I went back this time, I had a new strategy. I stayed close to the wall and snuck around to attack his two buddies first. They were easy to deal with on their own, leaving the big guy all alone. I threw my axe first and used the deadly chop spell to lower his defense, carefully avoiding the orange warnings this time. He ended up not being too tough without his friends, and I found a nice bag of silver in the chest he'd been guarding. Well, thank you very much. Next, I blew up these heretic shooters by leading them to this barrel I chopped. Then accidentally attracted these two brawlers earlier than intended when I hit one with a stray axe. Oops, I wasn't axing you. I managed to deal with them before making some serious mistakes fighting this group of 3. I ended up running away to heal before going back in, picking off these archers first this time around, then dealing with the shield guy. I was finally starting to get a bit more confident with my dodging and made it to the boss a few fights later. His health was a lot higher than mine, and first go didn't go so well at all. I ran away to heal and came back for another try, throwing an axe at his back for a better start. It definitely didn't go as smoothly as I'd like, and I almost ran away again, but stuck it out and finished him in the end. This chest held a new tier 3 bag and another cape along with a bit more silver. Back up top, I found another orange glowy guy to fight, which was a piece of cake after the dungeon boss. Then wandered into this heretic keep where even the rats were a bit tougher than usual. Further inside, I ended up with another buddy tagging along. They got knocked down fighting these guys, and I don't guess I can help them back up. Eventually, though, he was back on his feet, and after we finished them, he taught me what seems to be the customary Albion celebration spin. We fought a few more, but I was overloaded and out of time to play anyway. I think it's time to call it a day. When I logged back in, my buddy was long gone, and I fought this cutthroat all alone, earning my first level of reputation when I defeated him. Now I'm reputable. I told this arsonist about my achievement, but he didn't care. Then I hopped back on my mule and ran past the rest of the heretics, back through the knoll to Highland Cross. I studied some of the scholar's gear I'd looted and sold a few things, then decided to work on a set of tier 3 tools next. I couldn't craft them yet, so I crafted a couple extra tier 2 tools and studied them. This gave me enough fame to unlock Journeyman Toolmaker, and I made a full set of tier 3 tools. At this point, I guess I just thought they were extra fancy red tools, and stuck all my old tier 2 tools in the bank, only to go to the swamp to find they were actually red because I didn't have them unlocked. I could craft them now, I just couldn't use them. In order to unlock them, I'll have to earn some fame using that particular tool, so I went back to town and switched back to my old tools, putting the new ones away for now. I dumped all my materials there too before heading out to gather everything I could carry. In the swamp, I got some good experience with my skinning knife, used my sickle till it broke, and chopped trees till I couldn't carry anymore. I refined it all and put it in the bank too. Then I went to repair my tools. The price of full repairs scared me away though, and instead I opted to salvage my old ones and use all the extra materials I had to make new tools. Problem solved. Now off to level up my pickaxe and hammer skills some. By the end of hour 7, I'd just reached the learning point for most of the gathering skills, and decided I'd take a break and come back to that. Instead, going to the Royal Commander Flynn for his last quest, the Heretic Keep. I'd already been there before, but this time I was all alone. Well, except for the heretics, of course. I fought a few in the keep before heading to the cellar, where my quest required me to kill 12. It also suggested a party size of 2 or more, but I'm supposed to be solo, right? At this point, I was starting to develop a rhythm with the axe, throwing it first like a sneak attack, using the deadly chop early on to lower their defense, and then whatever this Q spell is, just as quickly as it can cool down. Oh, and finally dodging most of the time, of course. I had a defense spell too I was finally remembering to use, and in no time I'd finished my quest. I took out a few more just for fun and fame, and then headed back up the stairs. Then I probably could have avoided some on the way out, but I knew every one I took out would make me a little bit tougher. I traveled back and turned in the quest, deciding to go gather more stuff so I could level up and use those new tools, until I spotted this dungeon with my name on it. All of the enemies were pretty easy to deal with after fighting those at the keep, except this thug guarding a chest that put me on the run. I came back though and defeated him the second time, stealing this bag of silver from the chest after. I fought these big brawlers next, and boy, they sure hit hard if you're too slow dodging. For the most part though, my dodging was way better now. After editing those first few hours, I was starting to worry. I was able to finish the boss fellow the first try this time and got some goodies from the chest at the end. Then finished out the hour, still trying to level up my tools. But by the beginning of hour 8, I was kinda over it and used some learning points instead to unlock them all. Back in town, I got my new Tier 3 tools out of the bank and salvaged the Tier 2 tools. Then, never mind using those new tools, I just wanted to go fight more baddies. So I headed off to find another solo dungeon. The first one was easy enough until I ran into Big Spencer here. After running away once, I managed to finish him the second try. Then, didn't even notice this power-up, and I think I got a bit confused and thought that was the end. I found another dungeon after that and was still doing a lot better, despite making some occasionally epic mistakes. Yes, I'm sure throwing that axe way over there will help a lot. I did finally notice one of these power-ups I could grab. I don't know what it does just yet, but I like it. With my new tornado powers, I continued through the dungeon, but they wore off soon enough. Halfway through, I faced this trapper guarding an interesting-looking chest with a book on top. After defeating him, I found it had a tome of insight inside. I didn't use it yet and faced this brawler next with his bouncer buddy. Got stunned by the big guy, and then he clapped me hard. It stung, but I beat them both anyway. At the end, the boss was guarded by these two fire-shooting crossbow guys. I did a horrible job dodging the first's attacks, but didn't let the second hit me once. There were a few rats to deal with too. Then I turned to face the biggest guy. I lined up my first axe throw to take out the rat too. Then ended up having my most successful boss fight yet. Give me those goodies. Feeling pretty good and wanting more, I dove headfirst into the next solo dungeon I saw, maybe a bit too confidently. I regrouped and did better on my next try. The enemies were easy to deal with on their own now, but I was finding the bigger groups can get out of hand quick. Oh, but look, I missed another power-up. I grabbed it for some sort of red tornado boost and went back to tear through the enemies that had run me off just a moment ago. I had a bit of a speed boost and some extra damage, so I made the most of it, rushing from one enemy to the next before it finally ran out. This dungeon had a chest with a book too, guarded by a pyromaniac. The fight was pretty straightforward. If he had any special attacks, he didn't use them at all. I got another tome of insight from the chest, and used both of them after that. It said something about making sure you were wearing eligible gear when you used it, and I think that was making me a little unsure about using them yet. I ended up getting one more of the tornado buffs, this one green with red shields. I think it was some sort of healing with increased defense, and it ran out just in time for these three bullies. I took out two, but ran to heal before finishing off the last, and at the end there was another biggest roughneck to fight for the chest. The pattern was the same as the other fish choppers, and despite a few mistakes, I still defeated him on the first try. I started hour 9 making a new helmet and shield instead of repairing my old stuff, then switched to this mercenary jacket I'd found because my soldier armor was about to break too. After that, this beautiful bird caught my eye, reminding me of the mounts I could buy. I had quite a lot more money than the last time I'd looked, but I wasn't sure what else I'd want to buy and decided just to upgrade to Tier 3. With an ox or horse for my choices, I ended up buying this journeyman's riding horse for 10k silver. Then I sold my mule for 2k and decided to travel back to Hator next. The enemies here were Tier 4, and I spotted this very different looking corrupted dungeon not far from the entrance. It said Tier 5 enemies, which I'm pretty sure I'm not ready for, and it looks like I don't have the item power required anyway. Instead, I took on a few skeletons, including this extra tough, dominant Frostweaver. It gave me some trouble, but was worth it for the big chunk of fame I was awarded. Eventually, I found one of the green solo dungeons and headed inside. This one was different, more cave-like instead of a mine. The enemies were different too, starting with these Amazon-looking women, some little red rock elementals, and Groot here. They were all easy enough to deal with until I ran into this lady and her wizard friend. I almost died on the first go, and it went just as bad the second time. Maybe I'll just come back. I fought a few more Tier 4 in the open world instead, and found this new iron ore and travertine. Most of these skeletons weren't too hard to deal with, except for these glowy ones. I had to separate this one from its buddy after they tried to end me. Now I can take them on. Along with green glowy bad guys, there was also green glowy uncommon iron ore. It looks like I'll need an even better pickaxe to collect it though. I made my way back south to Brent Knoll after that and into a tier 3 dungeon instead. It went mostly the same, fighting a variety of heretics, a mini boss in the middle, grabbed this little tornado buff, and then at the end faced a big boss again. This one though gave me a lot more trouble than usual. I failed 3 different times before regrouping and taking a moment to look at all my gear spells. I switched the buff on my boots from weight to toughness, my healing to fury for armor, then this passive bit on my axe from bleed damage to a healing life leech. With my changes, it was still a close fight, but this time I prevailed. The chest was extra full this time too, though most of it was mage gear I couldn't use. I'm sure I can always sell it. Hour 10 started off with another dungeon run. I was really starting to enjoy the strategy of timing my spells right and trying to figure out which enemy I should kill first, and of course the excitement of what I might find in the chests. This middle one had some silver. The one at the end, though, had some tier 4 guardian armor. Ooh, and it looks like I've already unlocked the ability to wear it. I opened a few bags of silver I'd collected and then put on my shiny new armor and ended up choosing various debuffs for all the spells. Then, while I was at it, I finally used these tomes of insight I'd collected for 1000 fame each.
Ooh.
Pretty excited about my new tier 4 armor, I really wanted the whole set now, and headed back to the city of Martlock. There, I stopped in at the Warrior's Forge to see what I needed. Looks like I'll have to unlock them to craft it in the first place. Then I'll need steel bars made from iron and bronze. For now, I guess that will wait. I just remembered these expeditions I can do. I chose a tier 3 expedition and it took me to a mine full of tier 2 heretics to fight. It was quite easy and I finished it in no time. These don't have a chest at the end like dungeons, but I got some nice silver and a sealed royal sigil instead. I decided to head back south to the little Highland Cross town next, but on my way couldn't resist one more solo dungeon. I got a tome of insight in the middle of this one, then fought this chief blaster I hadn't really dealt with before at the end. I made some mistakes and it was definitely a close one.
That hurts.
But I stuck it out and finished him on the first go.
Ooh.
I rode into Highland Cross by the beginning of hour 11, and after riding straight past it by accident, made my way to the repair station. My armor was looking pretty rough, and I started to repair it piece by piece, until I finally just bit the bullet and paid to repair everything. Now I can study or sell whatever I want without having to worry about repairing it first. I studied some things first, then sold some too. I thought about selling this royal sigil and this soul I didn't know what to do with yet, but decided to hang on to them just in case for now. Next, I grabbed some stuff I'd stored in the bank, then went to the Warrior's Forge to craft and study until I could use learning points to unlock the crafting ability for the rest of the tier 4 gear. I couldn't make it here though, so I headed back to Martlock after that. On the way, I collected a bit of pine and iron. When I made it to the city, I turned the iron into steel bars and had to unlock the wood planing skill to refine the pine. Then I took all my materials to see what I could make. I didn't have enough steel for the axe, but I was able to make myself a new tier 4 shield. I went to the very crowded Bank of Martlock after that. Storing all the extra materials so I had plenty of room to carry stuff. Back to Hator next, I started looking for more iron.
Elephant! Bye-bye, elephant.
Somehow, though, I ended up sucked back into another solo dungeon. With a little bit of tier 4 gear now, I wanted to give one of these tier 4 dungeons another try. This one looked different too, sort of like a castle maybe. Inside, there were new enemies I hadn't seen yet, including this Morgana lady and several bats instead of rats. This book attacked me, and when it fell to the ground, turned into some sort of monster that took off after another player that had wandered into the dungeon too. I followed Sloth741 and they invited me to join their party. I'm not allowed to join any parties this playthrough though. Sorry, Sloth. We continued through most of it together anyway. I'm not sure what difference it makes. He left this boost and I took it, and we fought through several enemies. Down this hallway we split up and I almost got eaten alive by books. Then we took on these really tough twin guards for a friendlier book. Sloth wasn't slow about getting that though, leaving me out of luck. A bit disappointed, I continued on, never to see Sloth again. I made it through a few more battles after that until I ran into this lava monster and its magic Morgana guards. They summoned bats that attacked too, and no matter what strategy I tried, I wasn't able to defeat any of them. After giving up again on a tier 4 dungeon, I got back to gathering materials for the next set of gear while also fighting random enemies. Turns out it was my lucky day and a revenant dropped this tier 4 knight's helmet. Ooh, thank you very much. I equipped it with stone skin and toughness spells, then bit off a little more than I could chew with these two. You know, I really need this iron over here anyway. The next fight, I increased my reputation to virtuous, along with reaching Master Reaver on my destiny board, which I'm pretty sure is important. Fighting in the open world seems to be going just as well or better than the dungeons. While gathering iron, I was fighting as much as I could, even finding another tier 4 helmet before giving in to the lure of another solo dungeon. This one was different too, looking a bit like a mix between the castle I'd just been in and the Amazon cave. Inside were the skeletons and undead I'd just been fighting in Hador. There were ghost bats here that exploded when they died, and these very overwhelming undead ghosts.
Holy cow.
I grabbed this power-up next and fought through the rest pretty easily until I ran into this little goblin guy guarding a chest. Spending too much time in his acid attack lowered my health, and it wasn't long before I was on the run. I did better the next time and successfully defeated him, then opened up the chest and left. Pretty sure there was actually more left though, and I just thought that was the end. Oops. I finished up gathering all the ore and logs I could carry and headed back to Martlock after that. I grabbed my tier 3 materials from the bank and took them to refine with the new ones. It was a bit costly, but I had plenty of coin. Then I used the steel to finish out my tier 4 gear. I switched to a new spinning attack on my axe, then mostly the same for everything else. Back out in the open world for hour 13, I tested out my new gear, deciding I didn't really like the new spin attack on my axe, so I switched it back to the rending strike I'd had before. Really though, I think the problem was just this Ryzen marksman was extra tough. My third attempt to fight him resulted in my first knockdown. Thankfully, I was just able to get back up after a time and didn't lose anything.
Don't take my monies.
Then tried and failed twice more before giving up for now. It was back to another solo dungeon after that. It was one of the castles again. I guess if I'd pay attention to my map down here, I'd know it was called a hidden sanctum. Either way, I followed its red carpets and fought through several of these Morgana enemies. In the next big room, I decided to attack this metal spewer first. Don't mind me over here, just hacking this thing of yours to pieces. Yep, and you guys are next. I smashed a few more metal spewers too, then got a bit worried when I saw this big guy.
Holy cow.
Turns out he wasn't actually that tough though. It was the lady in the next room I should worry about. I managed to take down her friend, but she put me on the run with her bats chasing after me. I tried and failed again before finally defeating her on the third go. She was guarding a nice book chest with not just 1 but 4 tomes of insight. Ooh, very nice. I used them all this time and continued to the next set of enemies. They were all too close together to separate, so I focused on one of the smaller squires first. After finishing him though, I ended up having to run away. I went back, focusing on the other squire and his crossbow next, before moving on to Bat Lady. When I finished her, the bats exploded and I was free to take on the big guy, which was easy enough on his own. I found this nice power-up after that, and the rest didn't give me too much trouble until I made it to the boss. Her cultists were no problem, but her and her bats were. Okay, let's try that again. I did a better job of dodging the second time, and it was a full-time job with this boss. Eventually, though, I managed to finish her off.
Woohoo!
I ended hour 13 with one more solo dungeon. When I got inside, this guy, Fredard, was already there. He was running though, so I decided to stick around and help. This mine had 2 middle chests, but I don't know what was inside them. Fredard got them both. I suppose that's only fair, he was here first. I got this little tornado boost though, and there is something neat about having a buddy to travel with, even a quiet one. At the end of the dungeon was a chopper boss, and when we defeated him, I left as Fredard emptied the chest. I did another solo dungeon at the beginning of hour 14. This This one actually solo. There were 3 chests in it too, and they're all for me this time. Also, I'm really starting to like Chop Chop here. His fight phrases are my favorite. I wandered around the open world next, where I happened to loot this tier 6 mercenary hood I couldn't wear. I'd have to level that line up on my destiny board so much to unlock it, I'll probably just sell it instead. I drifted back to another dungeon next, and it was mostly the same, except this new, bigger power-up that gives me extra fame. Yes, please. It eventually wore off, and I fought this trapper for a book chest. There, I got this Adept Tome of Insight, which gave me a whole 10,000 fame. It mastered new levels for almost all of my warrior gear. And at the end, it was Chop Chop again. Hello, old friend. I traveled next to this tier 4 swamp named Curlew Fen to try out a solo dungeon there. It ended up being another mine where I met this very annoying set of healers. Then defeated 2 bosses for their chests before heading back above ground. While I was in the swamp, I was also looking for some medium hide. I need it for the next tier cape and bag, but hadn't found any yet. Until I ran right up on these monitor lizards. I bet you've got the hide I want. They did, and I collected a few along with some fame from these ghoulies too. Then grabbed some of the tier 4 fiber, hemp, and finally headed back to the city. First, I stopped at the Hunter's Lodge because I really want to think the cape is made there for some reason. Oh yeah, it's actually made at the Toolmaker's instead. Once I got that sorted, I found I didn't have it unlocked to craft, of course. I was able to use learning points though to unlock it in the bag, then had to unlock the refining skill for those materials too. I refined everything I had, whether I needed it or not, and ended up making a bag instead of a cape when I realized I only had enough cloth for one. After dropping off my extras at the bank, I headed back to the swamp to gather more hemp, fought this big ghostly guy and his friend, then ended up back in a dungeon again. There was just something so satisfying about completing them. Trying to figure out the best way to tackle a bigger group of enemies is also a lot of fun. I like to take out the weakest first and go from there. I got just 2 chests from this dungeon, with mostly a couple bags of silver. Then gathered a bit more hemp before heading back to the city. There, I made more cloth and had enough for a cape now too. I noticed several much cooler capes, but I didn't have any of the stuff to make those. I had a look around after that to see if I could find where to use some of the random things I'd collected, but couldn't find anything except for some stuff at the Warrior's Forge that used the royal sigils. I ended up selling some random gear I'd looted, still saving up for another mount. Of course, I was in another dungeon at the beginning of hour 17. I got the middle chest and fought this mortar when I completed my daily bonus that day. I'd used up my 3 free days of premium and don't really know what the keys do anyway, but I'll take those learning points, thanks. At this point, I didn't know how to get that book it unlocks and only figured it out a few days later after missing about 5 of them. Back outside the dungeon, I fought a couple loose skellies and leveled up to Master Adventurer. Ooh. I was thinking that was the main line on my Destiny board, and when I went to check, sure enough it was. The next tier requires over 1 million fame, and the one after that, 6 million. With only 6 hours left, I wonder how far I'll be able to get. Well, back to dungeoning then. This one was full of ghost rats and bats. I got more runes and a bit of silver from the chest in the middle. Then at the end, I dealt with the most difficult boss I'd faced yet. It kept spawning in these undead soldiers, making things extra difficult. After the second failed attempt, I used this Tome of Insight I'd forgotten to use. It leveled up a couple things, but I still failed on the 3rd try. On the 4th try, I was careful to save up my axes to use after he'd spawned both his soldiers, sending them through all 3 of them. It was still close, with lots of red tinting my screen. In the end, though, I celebrated with a victory spin. Give me those goodies. I traveled back south to my starting town of Highland Cross at the beginning of hour 18. I wanted to grab some things I'd left at the bank here and stopped to repair my things. Turns out I can't repair my tier 4 stuff here though, but at least I can smelt my bronze for free. I had sort of forgotten about the expedition portals and thought about doing one here. It only had tier 3 available though, so I decided to wait and do a better one in the city instead. I sold a few things at the marketplace next and had a look at the price of the swiftclaw mount. Somehow I had a skin for it and decided to try and save up 250,000 silver for that. Really though, I want one of these 1 million silver huskies one day. It was back to Martlock after that when I saw this crazy statue in the road. It looked really menacing, but I guess someone just stuck it there. In the city, I checked the map for the repair station first. The city was big, but I was starting to get used to where most things were. Went to the Warrior Forge next and checked to see what I needed for that tier 5 gear. It was titanium for the metal, and I remembered I'd need to upgrade my tools to tier 4 first. This time though, you have to unlock each tool individually. I put my focus into leveling up the pick and axe first, before deciding I didn't really feel like doing that right now. Instead, I remembered I was supposed to do one of those expeditions here in the city and made my way to the blue portal. I chose an adept individual expedition this time and found myself teleported to a graveyard. It was full of skeletons of course, and I cut my way through them pretty easily. Didn't even have any trouble with this glowy guy guarding... well, nothing, I guess. I did hit this checkpoint next and continued working on my quota. There's something very satisfying about seeing those check marks fill in. The final boss here was surrounded by skeletons, and I took them out first. Then dealt with the Death Lord at the end, completing the expedition and earning myself 4,000 coin, a royal sigil, and a nice victory spin. I went back to the toolmaker after that and did just a bit more studying, trying to work on unlocking those tools. Then when I logged back in the next day, I did one more expedition. This one was pretty much the same, except for me taking a little potty break. I defeated the boss at the end and earned myself a nice bag of coin again. Realizing I'd also have to level up my gathering skills to even use the tier 4 tools, I headed back to the open world at the beginning of hour 19. Hador was just next to Martlock with tier 4 material and enemies, and I was starting to notice those enemies were giving me a lot of fame compared to the dungeon ones. I was fighting any of them I spotted for the extra silver too, really wanting that fancy mount. I noticed this big blue portal on my map and decided to check it out, finding a road to Avalon. Lethal PvP? No thanks, I don't think so yet. Maybe another solo dungeon instead. Despite realizing at this point I was likely getting more fame running around in the open world, I just couldn't resist. This one was a mine again, and aside from these very frustrating twin healers, I didn't really have any problems at all. Oh look, it's Mr. Chop Chop again. I fought some more in the open world, still trying to decide if it was better than the dungeons. Oops, sorry Mr. Marmot. After killing a few, I spotted one more dungeon, a hidden sanctum this time. It had another of the fame bonus boosts, guarded by this big Morgana enforcer. I dealt with him and rampaged through all the enemies I could with the boost. This bonus and the book chest you find in these dungeons was making it hard to decide what I should focus on. I faced a Morgana Magistra at the end of this sanctum. She was summoning demons with her book and an evil laugh, but I had the last laugh and finished her in the end. I spent a little more time in the open world after that, alternating between chopping enemies and chopping trees, wandering around this fort of some sort. I'd seen one before, but thought the guards would attack if I went in. I tried anyway this time to find this big guy standing inside. Then I chickened out and didn't click him, traveling back to Martlock instead. I finally unlocked the ability to craft the tier 4 pick and axe, but still needed to unlock the ability to use them, so I went back out to the open world to gather more things. But all I really wanted to do was fight stuff. One more solo dungeon won't hurt, right? It was one of the cave-looking ones called Hidden Caverns. The first enemy looked really big and freaked me out just a bit. In the end though, he wasn't really that tough at all. I ran into a bear next and this giant lady. Worst of all though was this stupid lightning rock. It really packs a punch and almost ended me on my first attempt to smash it. I was more careful next time, taking the power up after I finished it off. Woo! Its red tornado gave me a boost to fight more of the giants, then I ran into this giant. Move! It wasn't as bad as I thought, and I got another power-up after that. Then, when it wore off, I got one more after fighting this druid and his bears. Too bad the last one wore off before I fought this crazy berserker. Its cheerleader friend was boosting its attack, and I wasn't dodging well on top of that. No! Third time's the charm, though. I focused on stopping the buff first, careful to dodge. and eventually managed to defeat them before moving on to this book guard. It was an Earthkeeper sage who was flinging lightning for days, but he wasn't a problem at all after those other two. Inside the book chest, though, was only one beginner's tome for 1,000 fame. I did end up finding a 4th power-up, which I then traded for the 5th. Darn, I was hoping you could double up. This Cavern's End boss was an Earthkeeper Elder with lightning attacks too. I dodged a lot and squeaked out a win before looting the chest and going right back to another solo dungeon again. The middle boss on this one was new to me and had some really high health. I thought its attacks were extra crazy until I finished it and realized there'd been a mortar attacking this whole time too. You get out of here. I got a nice stack of 5 bags of silver, then fought the same guy at the next middle chest, without the help of the mortar guy this round. For some reason though, after I finished him, I guess I didn't see the chest up the stairs. It's painful to watch, but there it goes. At least I got this end chest after fighting the biggest roughneck. And there was finally some armor in it I could maybe use. But after much indecision, I decided what I was wearing already was best. Hour 21, I headed back into town with my eye still on a tier 5 weapon, but still pretty far from being able to use the tools I needed to gather titanium. Instead, I went to the marketplace to sell some stuff and see how much money I had. I was getting close to the 250k I needed for the swiftclaw, or so I thought. When I went to double check its price, it was a lot cheaper here in Martlock at only 99,000 instead. You're coming with me, swiftclaw. I could have got something tier 6, but I already had this beautiful Miststalker skin, and it's just so darn cool looking I couldn't resist. I went a little half-heartedly back to leveling up my tools, but before I knew it, I'd done 2 more dungeons instead. Both of them only ended up with 1 chest at the end, and after that, I was pretty certain that open world fighting was time better spent. It seemed like they were definitely giving me more fame, despite being a bit spread out. They were also dropping goodies pretty often too, including one of the 10,000 fame books. Early in hour 22, I made a quick pit stop back at Martlock, and since I still couldn't use the tier 4 tools, decided to make myself a tier 3 fishing pole instead. I headed off to the swamp with it, but when I noticed this solo dungeon with blue glowy bugs around it, sort of like the uncommon ores, I couldn't resist. I'm not sure if these are any different or if I was just seeing things, but I'll never know because when this lightning rock almost killed me, I got mad and left. Well, so much for that. That's okay, I wanted to go fishing anyway. I caught myself too, but didn't really know what to do with them. It was a nice change of pace though, and then I got back to destroying everything in sight. I'd reached my daily bonus again and unlocked some sort of chest. I couldn't get it without premium, but I did realize I could claim that Adept Tome of Insight it kept telling me I'd unlocked. Oh, I guess I've missed out on a few of those. I used it and another I had too for a nice chunk of fame. Now back to your regularly scheduled game. After wandering around the new open world for a while, I realized I hadn't done an expedition yet that day. I thought about trying tier 5, but wussed out and chose tier 4 again instead. It ended up being mostly pretty easy. I finished off the 5 bouncers I needed early on and grabbed this little stack of silver, then destroyed the final boss, Crazed Chops, and his fishy friend with plenty of health left. It was in hour 23 when I finally realized that the tier 5 gear I'd been wanting had been right under my nose the whole time. I didn't have to make it myself, I could just buy it. Oh. I felt a bit stupid having not thought of it before and bought myself a full set of tier 5 gear. I just stuck with the same type of warrior gear I'd already leveled, then chose my spells when I equipped it all. I stayed defensive with my helmet, choosing stone skin and toughness. Pretty much the same for the armor, I picked a couple of debuffs and toughness, then the same stuff I'd had before on my boots. With the axe though, I decided to try again with the spin. I kept everything else the same and then studied my old set of gear at the forge for some fame. I had forgotten a cape and a bag though, might as well complete the set. Excited to try it all out, I headed back to Hador and picked a fight with the first baddie I could find. Yep, I think that will do just fine. The spin was really great for multiple enemies, and now I was able to take on much tougher tier 4 enemies. Maybe it's finally time to go check out one of the tier 5 areas now. I passed through Curlew Fen where I noticed something happening at one of the forts on my map though. I headed that way instead, and apparently wasn't the only one. Several people were gathered in the center, and I'm not sure what was going on, but Zaracto invited me to a party. Sorry guys, I'm not allowed to go to any parties. The ring glowed purple, and then they all left. I left too, but went north instead, making my way to the Tier 5 swamp, Bonepool Marsh. It was a non-lethal yellow PvP area, so I won't lose anything. Still, it made me a bit anxious. I even took a moment to read the tips. Since I'm not allowed to use any guides, I'll take all the help I can get. I think I should be able to see any hostile players on the map, and it looks all clear, though there are plenty of the giant cave people from the caverns here. I fought a few, nervously hugging the edge of the map. Then, at some point, I noticed this tab. There's my average item power. I think I'd seen this before, but forgotten about it. I checked my Destiny board too, and I wasn't even close to getting the fame I needed for the Grandmaster Adventurer. Might as well check out the solo dungeons while I'm here then. This one started off with a bang, and I decided I really liked the axe spin this time. With multiple enemies, it made for some different strategies, and figuring that out was a lot of fun. The Tier 5 heretics were a bit tougher, but I only had to run just once. Or twice. Well, maybe 3 times. It was old Uncle Chop Chop at the end, though, and I knew his pattern well, easily defeating him on my first try. Nearing the end, and finally having decided that the open world was better to get fame, I spent the first half of Hour 24 fighting as many of these Tier 5 enemies as I could. While I was at it, I found this very fancy Avalonian cape. Oh look, I've got a halo now. I fought several more after that, including these 2 that gave me a whole 15,000 fame each. Then I realized I'd unlocked all of my Tier 6 gear, which you need level 30 for in each item. With only 8 tiers left, I was getting close to the top, but Tier 7 doesn't unlock till level 60. Yeah, that's probably not happening in the next 30 minutes. I went to the marketplace and bought myself a Tier 6 Master's Axe and armor. Oops, almost forgot my shield. I tested it out in Eldon Hill, where I saw my first red circle on the map, marking a hostile group of players. Thankfully, though, they didn't come my way, and with the last of my 24th hour coming to a close, I finished the challenge with a full set of Tier 6 warrior gear, having reached Grandmaster Reaver and Master Adventurer in the main lines on the Destiny board. There's so much more to explore in Albion, though. I never even made it to the red or black zones, or did any PvP, though that was mostly just due to me being a big chicken. There's also a new update, Albion Foundations, which along with reshaping territory conflict, adds these new crystal weapons, and I really want one of those crystal axes. Be sure to let me know in the comments if you'd like me to continue this challenge to see how long it takes me to get to Tier 8, and go play Albion Online yourself while you wait.